50 years ago, the Spirit moved, and Tanca Verde Lutheran Church was born. Pastor Bob Linder was called as a mission developer by the Lutheran Church in America and went door to door gathering families in the Tanca Verde Valley who would be interested in starting a new church. Worship began in an apartment clubhouse and a local elementary school, but it was not long before land was acquired on Tanca Verde Road, and construction plans began for a permanent place to worship God and serve together. In 1977, the first service was held in the space now known as the chapel, and the congregation continued to grow. From the beginning, TVLC sought to be a community church, welcoming all people and reaching out to those in need. This vision led to the opening of the TVLC preschool in 1979, which began with just 12 children that first year, but quickly grew with the congregation and surrounding community. In 1982, Pastor Linder departed, and Frank Nosson was called as TVLC's next pastor.
So I've been in ministry for 50 years, and so almost half of that 50 years I spent working here. So this is a very special place for myself and our family, and find that there were four major pillars or things that we felt were important to develop to have a complete church. One was education. And so we hired youth ministers, we hired people that did Christian ed stuff. We were blessed that we could find a number of people that were willing to do that part-time. The second pillar was community ministry. And so we're still doing that in many different ways, collecting food for this and that. And the third pillar was worship and music, that we wanted to do that well and that our tradition demanded it. And then there was a fourth one, that the youth component, a lot of support for public schools, and a lot of for people who wanted a place that felt safer for them and their kids. So I hope that we keep moving, at least in those four important areas all the time.
I served as the first associate pastor of TVLC, had responsibilities in education, working with the preschool, fellowship, youth ministry, and then assorted calls and visitations as agreed upon between me and the lead pastor, Frank Nosson. Frank and I would constantly talk about the growth of the congregation numerically. And we were thinking, is there any way to get ahead of the growth? Is there any way that we can plan for it or be prepared for it?
You have a similar pattern of hiring staff, of responding to need, of looking at the community, trying to respond to the community, analyze the growth in the community. We knew as much as the city did about terms of where new housing was supposed to go. And
growth of the congregation called for, we needed to add a third worship service because we were on the verge of being too full. Out of the council, someone suggested maybe it's time to build a new worship area. And then all of a sudden, consensus in the council jailed around that idea. But then it also spoke to the fact that TVLC had this, how would I put it? This community that was very welcoming and very open to, regardless of what your background is, whether it be Lutheran, whether it be Baptist, whether it be non-Christian, whatever it is, you are welcome to be at TVLC. And so it was always interesting when we gathered people together, especially when we had theological discussions. We had everything under the sun, but everybody was welcome to be a part of that.
I served at TVLC as associate pastor from March of 1988 to December of 2000, so more than 12 years there. Well, I saw a lot of changes over the years I was there. TVLC was a growing, dynamic congregation, and there was always new members to get to know and to welcome. I saw several buildings go up in my time there. I think my first Sunday there, I think just the week or so before, the congregation had a groundbreaking ceremony for the new sanctuary. Now, of course, the current sanctuary. Some other things that is involved in is I was given the assignment of starting a group for seniors. And so we started the Prime Timers group. And so we scheduled a lot of fellowship activities and some trips that we did together. That was also another highlight of my time there. And I'm glad to see that the Prime Timers group still exists and is still meeting. And so serving that need for fellowship in the congregation. When I look back on my years at TVLC, I mean, it was really an important time in my life. Not only was my first call as a pastor, and so I grew a lot in terms of my skills in ministry. And I learned a lot from certainly from Pastor Nawson as the lead pastor at that time, and also from the other staff and pastors, and especially the people, the congregation that I worked with. So it really was a time I look back very fondly.
When I came here, there was 8,000 square feet of buildings on the campus, 8,000 square feet under roof, they said. When I left, there were 48,000 square feet under roof. Remodeled nursery, and we remodeled Linder Hall, and then the 28,000 square feet is the Family Life Center.
So when I first arrived at Tankerville Lutheran Church, that was to begin serving with Pastor Frank Nawson, who had many decades long ministry there and was part of the mission development of that church and through its many transitions and phases in those early years. And I had the privilege and pleasure of serving with him. And then Pastor Sandra Krogstad, who also came aboard about the same time in that year. I recall that when I first came to Tanque Verde, I think there were like about 900, I'm remembering, that were members and lots of people in worship. And that attendance did reduce, as also it did in many churches. One of the big shifts that took place under my tenure was moving from a more siloed approach to Christian education and faith formation to more cross-generational and a partnership between the church and the home with things like the Child in Our Hands conference and so forth. And so over the time that I was there, for example, we tried to emphasize more of a small group ministry and peer ministry and trying to build up and enable the parents and caring adults of children and youth to be also partners in passing on the faith.
TVLC, when I was there, it was wonderful. I mean, the people were willing to help, and they were positive, and they got involved and did fun things. Worship was awesome. I loved working with the children. I think I've been thinking about my favorite part of ministry, and I have to say, I believe it was all working with children, but probably the favorite part was like confirmation. Confirmation was important in my faith walk, and I've done confirmation in all my calls. And the preschool was and still is a gift, and I love the children's messages on Sunday. Also worked with the women in retreats and the Friday morning Bible study. And the women there were very good. We got together a task force for domestic violence. We sponsored a religious response to domestic violence and for the community, and it was very well received. Another important group that I learned a lot from, I facilitated the chronic illness support group. And I so admired those women, and I learned a lot from them.
When the ELCA in 2009 adopted the social statement on human sexuality, and in it, as many know, that gave acceptance of congregations and pastors that were open and affirming, that brought much controversy, as many people know, into the congregation, and that there was quite a bit of division at that time. And it was pretty painful and difficult to watch the church go through that and take some votes that had to do with questioning about whether we should be part of the ELCA or not, and how we interpret the Bible and so forth. And so it was hard to see some people, even before I left, themselves leaving the church and so forth. And trying to care for people along all sides of that spectrum was indeed a challenge. And yet, as I, in December of 2009, accepted a call to Sierra Evangelical Lutheran Church in Sierra Vista and watched from afar what was what TVLC was going through. It was, again, hard to watch as there was that major split and division that took place. But then to see TVLC work through that and heal and become strong and healthy again, it was such a joy to see that.
I was the lead pastor at Tinker Verde from August of 2011 until May of 2016 when I retired from ordained ministry. And the mantra when I got there, they had had a great, interim time with Pastor Greg Mantle, but the mantra was really, we lost a third of our people and half our resources. And there was still a lot of grieving going on and a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And now here's this other new person coming. And I don't think we've ever had a female lead pastor before. And what in the world now? So it was kind of a time of hope and anxiety all at the same time. But eventually we realized that we have a great deal of resources and we have wonderful people, and there are more people looking for a place like this to call their church home. And so to move on and to keep going and to create a vision of what could possibly be, and to make some new things happen, that was very exciting. Frankly, we do experience death and resurrection in our lifetimes, not just at the end, but all along. There's times when we think it's over now. I didn't even get ordained until I was 50 years old because I'd had a whole nother life before that. So anyway, as things got busier and busier, and more programs were growing and more people were joining, if we were going to keep going, it seemed clear that we needed an additional pastor. So in 2014, the call committee in the congregation called Pastor Josh Achenbach to be the associate pastor. And he came with his wife, Cheryl, and his twin baby boys, who were in strollers at the time. And now, of course, are big soccer players, and they have a sister. But that was another time of renewed energy for the congregation. And he took some leadership in the Children, Youth, and Family program, again, working with Sherry Mitztyford, and then, of course, the iconic Mary and Donna, who have been a steady force in anything having to do with children at Tinker Verde. In the midst of all of it, I have to say that I am just grateful to God for the privilege of the time that I spent as a pastor at Tinker Verde.
When I came to TVLC in 2014, it was very much a congregation on the upswing. Thanks to the leadership of Pastor Gail and Pastor Greg, they had navigated through some really difficult times and had grown to a place where they were once again able to call a second pastor. They'd also just launched the Rejoice Renew campaign that was focused on bringing some much needed repairs and updates to the then 40-year-old campus. And it became clear very quickly to me that this was a congregation of devoted individuals who were deeply invested in God's work here in this place. One of the Rejoice Renew projects was doing the roof recoating and painting of the whole exterior of the campus. And the fact that the majority of that work was accomplished by volunteers was just incredible. In my time here, I've so appreciated how, even though this is a congregation that is firmly grounded in the Lutheran tradition and the rich history here of worship and music and service, that this is a community that's also very open to doing new things and to following the Spirit's lead in new directions in the midst of a changing world, which has made this an incredible community to be a part of and an awesome place to serve.
Hi, friends. I'm Stephen Hilding. I was fortunate to serve as your associate pastor from 2018 to 2023. Oh, there are so many highlights. When I think about it, though, I feel the need to acknowledge that highlights sometimes come from the lowest of places, the challenges that we face, the walking through the mud together. We face something that that no one has faced in our lifetime, and that was the global pandemic. Overnight, we were catapulted into a new realm of trying to do ministry in different ways, of learning Zoom for programming, of responding to the evolving needs in the community. I was blown away by your willingness to say, what can we do, from making masks to making desks for students learning at home to growing the food ministry with the University of Arizona, so much so that we needed a dedicated space to house all the food. I think about going through that. There's a depth of relationship built that just never goes away, and so I'm so grateful for that time and for your leadership and the things that you all taught me in that time. I think about the fact that that was a time when many people and churches were not thinking much beyond the moment, and instead TVLC clung to the hope on the horizon, the promised future, and started preparing its spaces through Teva and the youth ministry, restructuring of that, through Grace Upon Grace, and renovating the chapel, the space where it all began. Thinking about a new age of ministry, which you're already living into now. And I just so fondly remember our time together, from really serious things like going through that to making silly videos and getting the congregation dancing, and remembering that we are church together and that we've got a job to do. And so I thank you, and I thank our staff at the time, and certainly Pastor Josh and family for all that you all did for us. So thank you.
In February of 2024, I was called by the people of Tanque Verde Lutheran Church to be your next associate pastor. In my very short time here, I have been privileged to see the openness and generosity of this congregation. I've been honored to share God's message of grace and love with you all, and blessed to imagine the new possibilities that the Holy Spirit will bring in this place. TVLC is a beautiful community of faith where people truly care about loving and serving their neighbor, worshiping God wholeheartedly, and striving to share the gospel with everyone who comes here. Looking forward to the future, I have no doubt that God has amazing things in store for us. And I can't wait to see where the Holy Spirit leads us next as we continue to strive to follow Jesus and share God's love.